If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankie'sPod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting.
Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I'm talking to Vern Littely. Now, me and Vern go back a long time, but we haven't seen each other for a long time. I think we first bumped into each other in Gutterslow in 1986 when he walked in my room. It was my room, I think, as a young nig, and I was only been there a couple of months before he had, so I was the older one. Hiya, Vern, how you doing?
I'm very good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And like I said to everyone, honestly, thanks for doing this, because if it wasn't for people coming on and volunteering to do it, I wouldn't be able to, and I'd just be sat here talking to myself, which, I'd get me locked up. So, the format of the podcast is just the 5 questions what I normally ask everybody, which is, where did you grow up? Why did you join the army? What was it like, and what did you do? Why did you leave? And what have you done since? And I know you've had you did a long time in the military, and afterwards you've had a very interesting time. So we can talk about that later on. But to start off with, if you can just tell us about yourself, where you grew up and what inspired you to join the military.
Yeah, certainly. I grew up in Birmingham. I joined the army in October 1985. I started. Why did I join the army? I think it's something I'd always wanted to do as a child. It's that. I wouldn't say I grew up with the airfix models and all the aspects of that, but it's something I'd always wanted to do. And when I think back to careers now, and I've got 2 teenage boys now, one who's obviously left school is in doing his A-levels, and one's in year 10 going to year 11 next year. I think I knew I was going to join the army from a very young age. There was nothing else planned. And I think when I look back now, I'd always wanted to join the army, and I'd always set myself, and I remember joining it. I think as well is that one of the other reasons I joined the army is my mother. My mother sadly lost her dad in the 1950s, and when he died, I think he died about 90 when he was about 56, but he'd been a boy soldier of World War One.
Wow,
he'd been a boy soldier of World War One.
Bloody hell!
And so when you think I was born in 1969, my mum was born in 41. My grandfather, on my mum's side, was born in November 1898. So it's quite something, really, when you look at it that way. And she'd always told me he'd sadly died when she was a young child, and she'd only ever talked about him as a memory and things. And she said he joined underage. And I only knew this, and probably when I knew you when I was in 3-4 battery in 2000, 2001, and this was always in the background, and the records were that, and I joined the army in 1985, went through into the Royal Artillery, and again obviously with Junior Legion Regiment, as you say, posted to 47 Field Regiment, and found myself in your room in the November of 1986. But I think the big thing I need to talk about more about this thing about my grandfather is that it's always been there in the back, and I never knew my grandfather. Yeah. I never knew him. He died 1955, I think. And I remember she said he enlisted underage, and he'd been in the desert, and he'd been with horses or something like that, something to do with the Gloucesters. And I remember that, and he'd been in the Air Force, and there was 2 medals and a bit of stuff. And I took back 2001 now, when I look back now, I'd gone back and it turned it round. But I actually went to the National Archives, Kew to Kew, the National Archives, and been through the records. And from some medals, I got his service number from the Royal Air Force, and I was all the way to be able to track this. And I always remember going to the records, and it was in a paper file, and I'll never forget this. Going through this paper book, 05, 04, 05. It's like your paper version of your personal record, PDR record, and 06 came across. And 06 was William Frampton King. Date of birth, height, where he grew up in Clevedon in Somerset. And I was looking at this record, and I got a copy of it, and I remember going, and he'd enlisted in the army on the 3rd of November 1950. Date of birth, 31st of October 1896. And I remember sitting on the train travelling back from London to Andover, and somebody's going to very kindly give me a lift back to Wilton, back to Larkhill. And I remember ringing my mum and said, "Mum, I've got it. I've got his record here." So he joins the army 3rd of November 1915. Date of birth, 31st of October 1896. And she said that wasn't his date of birth. It was the 6th of November 1898. And you changed his date of birth by 2 years and a week to enlist underage. So when I think about it now, when I say to some people, my grandfather was a boy soldier in World War One who enlisted underage, I have one of those, and it's quite something really, and obviously we're going to talk about subsequently what I've done since I've gone on since I left the army, is that that's always been in the background.
Yeah.
About my grandfather, and it's not because I wanted to join because of my grandfather, but it's always been in the background. And whether I'm doing talks, I'm a part-time battlefield tour guide in the background, he's always there.
I was going to say it'll become very apparent later on when you start talking about what
exactly.
you
So it's always there, and I think so. Why did I join the army? I think really it was nice. I always looked at it towards as a career, and I'd always looked at it as for join at 16 as I did. I left school in June of '85. By 22nd of October 1985 that year, which is 40 years this year. I went to the Junior Leaders Regiment at Nuneaton, Junior Leaders Regiment Royal Artillery, and I did the year's training there. Trained as a signaller, and was posted to 47 Field Regiment, Royal Artillery, which was based in Gusserslough. Initially to HQ Battery, as you say, that's where we first met. And obviously you've introduced me to the world of Grosh and other activities.
Don't blame me. Don't blame
no,
me.
jokingly aside. But seriously, when I look, and I think there was always something I was going to do. And obviously that career, I'm going to say the career, but obviously planning ahead. When and then subsequently I went from that point of what's going to be 40 years this year. And then I continued till retiring to July 2011. And subsequently, it was quite nice actually, because you are one of the, when I look back now, you're one of those markers that I remember, and I mean that in a nice way, Frankie, because I'm, that first time, and then when I was on promotion, I first got promoted to sergeant in 2000. I went to 3-4 battery, and you were the one first people I bumped into.
Yeah, I really enjoyed 3-4 battery.
Yeah, exactly.
Just pushing it back a bit. So Royal Artillery. Did you pick the Royal Artillery, or was it picked for you at the careers office?
When I look
as
back,
it was for a lot of people,
I wanted to join the army, and I wasn't really too sure what corps to join, and I think I was possibly led by the recruiting sergeant.
As a lot of people are.
Who was, if I remember rightly now, and I remember, now you put me on the spot now, I remember, was a member of 4-5 Field Regiment Royal Artillery.
You've got to keep the numbers up.
They've got to keep the numbers up. And the rotors or the quotas, whatever you want to look at it. And I think when I look back now and I think, I think it was quite nice, actually. I think it probably was the right career for me when I look back at what I went on to do otherwise within the Royal Artillery, aspects of that within the Royal Artillery. It probably was one of the right choices for me, I think.
So turning up at junior leaders for training, like the basic training, and the rest of the 12 months that we did there, were you prepared for that? Did you know what to expect? Was it a shock? Did you enjoy it?
I don't think. I think any 16-year-old lad who enjoys the army from that point of view is no. I think when I look back at my period of first 6 weeks, it is well known amongst my troop how bad at drill I was. And it certainly was a drill. Drill is a pill that I've still to this day would have trouble swallowing, I think would be the phrase. And it is well known amongst us, and we're already talking about having a 40-year anniversary reunion this year. Is that no? I think when I look back now, I can see the groundings of what I became. You can see the develop. I think anybody who goes into the army for the time will always get that shock and that thing. I mean, I hadn't been in scouts. I had been in army cadets. I hadn't got a big brother who'd been in the military. The only link I'd got to the military was a grandfather who'd been served from 1915 through to 1918.
I mean, you mentioned cadets there. I've spoken to lots of guys on the podcast who were in a cadets, and it did them. It gave them an insight into joining the army and help them during training. And I remember some of the guys who were in the troop with me at junior leaders who were cadets, and it showed. They could do a bit of marching. They could bull their boots and they could iron the kit. It did help them. But I don't think it makes. I mean, I've had guys come on a podcast and say, literally, I was a really good cadet. I probably didn't need to do training. I could have gone straight into it, and that's not the case. You might be a cadet, but you've still got a lot to learn. You can't be taught everything. And I grew up very quickly in training, and then it subsequently regressed to being a 12-year-old when I got to my unit, when I got to 4-7. I think that was the case of falling in with the wrong crowd. I fell in with all them guys who used to go to the NAFI every night, type of thing.
Yeah, when I look back, and it's the confidence and things, and being able to speak in front of crowds. And I remember at one point we had to do, as you say, obviously with the junior leaders regiment, it was the actual, the aspects of being soldiers, and that we used to go and do leadership weeks that we L2, L3, and I remember doing the bits in Wales, and also we carrying oil drums across fields and at Bramcote. And I remember when I look back now, and I being able to stand in front and brief and I'm thinking, I'm 16 years of age here, talking to people about what I'm going to do. And then at that time, I remember one of my reports as I was coming out. As we were mustering in the October of '86, will make a good instructor. And when I think about it now, that subsequently during my time in the military, I went on to do instructing in the army, became an RA6 instructor in the signals. I then subsequently went on to working. I know we're going to look at that further later in the podcast. Is that further education? And I currently am talking to you from training earlier today, and I suddenly think there's no doubt about it. The person I am today, academically or professionally, there's no doubt about it. The bedrock foundation, I suppose, is back at Bramcote. It's like a little tree that's grown, but it's definitely
it's amazing that like you said, like from small acorns grow mighty oaks. I think that's not everyone falls into that category. I didn't. I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say I wasn't that good a soldier. I lasted 27 years, but I wasn't that good a soldier. I tried my best, but I fell between the cracks, I think, and I was quite happy to stay in them cracks. But some people, you have to have people like that as well. Not everyone's a shining star type of thing, and like I say, I'll be the first to admit that I wasn't. I got out as a full screw after 27 years, but I was happy, and I had a great time. I don't regret any bit of the army, none at all. Well, No, not really. A couple of stints AWOL, a couple of stints in Nick, but that's also again that's it's character building. I mean, I've had guys talk about junior leaders, and especially in the olden day, or before our time. I've had guys with in the 60s and stuff like that, and 70s, and there was the attitude then was very strict, a lot stricter than what we had it, and we always say that recruits now had it a lot easier than we did. I don't think they do. I think it's just different. Society's changed, people are different, the training has got to change. But going back to like 85 to 86 when we were there, I've had people mention bullying from instructors and stuff like that. I didn't experience any of that
No, not at all.
while I was there. Not at all. I'd heard about it in other troops, but I think that was just young lads talking, saying this, that, and the other. But I have heard about it in previous years. I think we were lucky to hit a period where maybe the mindset had changed. Because I mean, I had three fantastic troop sergeants and a fantastic troop commander. He was a Sergeant Major Julian Fox, and I can't thank them three enough.
No.
The way they treat us with dignity. They didn't. There was no bullying. There was no harassment. There was no picking. Doing shit just for the sake of it. Like changing parades and stuff like that. We had one or two, but I mean that's part of. You've got to get fucked about. You've got to be made tired. Did you experience anything like that?
No, nothing. And what I would say is that when I look back now, is that when you join it, you see those people in that position, that rank, that position. And I've always a firm believer that you take away an example from people. And I never saw it. And, when my true commander, we had a WO2 Pete Connolly. And I remember the way he was with us and the two troop sergeants. And I look back now and think, sadly, one of them, Al Smith's not here anymore. But I look at them and think, yeah, okay, they shouted at me because I couldn't, I wasn't very good at drill. But how I developed, how I became the way I am, and I think when I look back now, and then as you saying, I think how your first experiences in the military shapes how you become. As you saying, you went off in a certain path, but I wouldn't say, it's you look back. I'm a firm believer that how you learn from others. One of them, over the years later, Neil Hodges was one of my CP bombardiers when I was in 47 Regiment, and I learned a lot from him about life, about management, how to manage people, and I carried it on. And it's very, for me, it's how it carries on subsequently. And then as you're saying, you look at people and you think, yes, that's how I want to be like. But no, I wouldn't. I don't think for 1 minute I ever experienced anything in basic training that would sour my career or the way the person I became. And that, as you say, I know it did with others, and it kind of like was possibly passed down over the years. But I wouldn't think it. I didn't see anything myself with it. No.
It's interesting that you just mentioned that about like your CP bombarding. I mean, I don't know if you remember. I mean, I was a clerk when you rocked up, and I got sacked because I was shit and got sent to the guns as punishment. Best thing that could have ever happened to me. Best thing in the world. And they put and it's not the guys of of RHQ in the battery office that I remember. Really, what I do, but they're not the ones who made an impression on me. It's when I got to the guns and they put me on the biggest, hardest fucking matehead. His crew, Archie Gemmell, fucking massive ex-commando and scary as fuck. There you go, you're on his crew. That'll sort you out. and I was bricking it. I really was. And it turned out he's one of the nicest. I'd even say compassionate, but he was firm but fair, and he taught me a lot. And I mean, I might have got the odd dig off him now and again, but that's the way it was in them days.
I must admit, when I look back, I did from October '85, which is 40 years this year, through to 2011, July 2011. Subsequently, I've gone into further education and I work with apprentices, and I see with a lot of. Sometimes I see not so much now, but previously I've seen with managers, and I think in workplaces do see aspects, of that, good ones and bad ones and things like that. But now I must admit, it is quite something, and when I look back now and I think, I must admit, I think joining the army when I did, is one of the best things I could have possibly done.
So we'll move away from junior leaders. So when you turned up with the regiment, obviously we bumped into each other. I think that's quite a shock, and it's as scary as turning up at training when you go into your unit for the first time, because you don't really know what to expect. You think, especially coming from junior leaders, we had guys there who thought they fucking knew everything, and you get to unit and you get put, get knocked down a peg or so. How did you find it?
I must admit, I was a bit daunted by it. And when I think about it, within the room I was in with you, there's one at the other clerk with AWOL, the other lad, I can't remember his name, but you'll go, oh yeah, didn't stay. But I must admit, because I was only with you briefly, because I obviously joined you. I initially went to HQ battery, which is the battery you were in. I was only there for about a week and a half, wasn't I?
Yeah.
So if I remember right, joined on the Wednesday. Well, the following week, Monday, I'd gone up to one of the gun batteries on the road. Sorry, not of the main drag within the camp. But I must admit, I wasn't really sure what to expect. It was quite a shock to me. I think I'd gone there with a bit. Wow, this was a bit of a shock, and it is quite a scary experience. Yeah. I don't care. Because as you say, you were amongst people who have been in the army for 2, 3, 4, 5, 20 years.
And they looked old. They looked fucking old.
Yeah. And understandably sometimes, when you think about it. And I always remember in that first couple of weeks, I'd gone from HQ battery to 4 battery as one of the gun batteries. And there'd been a terrorist incident. And I remember I think sadly he's the late Roy Cave now, was the BK. He would have been he had been previously the RSM of 40. And he came out talking about, basically saying to you young lads, you don't know really what this is about, or the impact of this, or the real. It was a bit of a. And I remember he was basically explaining to us. I mean, he'd come from being an RSM of 40, but about the fact that this is part of the role you are in. And subsequently later on, if I'm right, including yourself, you went on to do the maze tour. I didn't do that maze tour. I did the North and the Ireland tour of 90. But I remember that thinking, this is the job we're in. And it was quite something. And it's quite, for me, it was quite a culture shock. I don't mind. And say I was probably, it was quite something when I first joined. For me, for those few,
it's
2 or 3 years, I found it quite.
Well, we forget. I mean, thinking back then, you had, you mentioned that about a terrorist incident, stuff like that. We lived with that threat. You don't think about it nowadays, but we did live with that threat. People going out and checking the cars in the morning, and no uniform out of camp and stuff like that. And that lasted for years, and it became second nature to us. So I remember, for example, years later, I was going on holiday, and we were going. I think it was where we got to Turkey. Syria had kicked off and stuff like that, and people had said to us, "No, in fact, no, it wasn't. Where were we going? I can't remember where we were going. Where we were going was a bit naughty. It was near somewhere naughty, and someone had said to me, and Sue, my ex-wife, had said, "Oh, you're going over there." It can be. We were like, "What are you on about? We lived with that threat for years. Even our wives and our children lived with that threat for years." And for people that are just like, they might think that's us trying to blow it out of proportion, but it's not. Families, even in Germany, were killed by the Republican terrorists, the IRA and the PIRA, and the real IRA, or whatever you want to, whatever faction you wanted to call ourselves. People were killed. Children were killed. There was a definite threat there at the time, which was, like you say, it can be a bit of a shock, but you learn to deal with it, and it became second nature. And then sometimes you just become complacent about stuff like that as well, where that causes issues.
When I think about that now, is that I remember of all the, just short of 20, I think it was about 2 months short of 26 years I did, that address for the BK. Address, is that the right word? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose address would work. Is one of the things I remember, and within a year of that, I'd been to Northern Ireland, and then following that subsequently within 6 months of that, which is 40 years, sorry, not 40 years, 34 years this year, we were in the first Gulf War. And suddenly, I'd gone from this very young lad joining the army into all these aspects of being, within 3 or 4 years, being 2 operational tours. And by 19, and I don't remember, the end of 1991, I had two medals. It's not all about medals, I know it's not about collecting medals, and I don't mean it that way.
It's not, but it's good.
I don't mean it that way. It's just the fact that suddenly, you're doing that job that you're paid for. And
so, I mean, for a lot of us, the first job that we did, so that you could say that you're doing what you paid for, was probably an island tour. For me, it was the Maze, which was a pretty mundane tour, really. Staggering in towers, going up to the Crumlin Road, staggering in towers there. Again, doing patrols around the area and stuff like that. It was quite a soft area around Lisbon. Did see a few little things, had a few interesting incidents, but nothing fantastic, you know what I mean? It wasn't South Armagh, it wasn't Belfast. For us, I'd say it was a fairly quiet tour. What was your first tour like when you went out? It was with Forbury, wasn't it?
First tour was, we were in Besbrook. We did January to July 1990. Obviously, we were in South Armagh. For me, it was quite interesting. It was rural. You were out and about. It was very interesting for me. It was definitely was interesting. It's not for me. Yes, you had to keep your wits about you, and obviously incidents sadly did happen. But for me, it was a rewarding experience. And for me, I went out there in the January of 90. I turned 21 on the 4th of July, 1990. And then on the 12th of that month, I was promoted. I got my first tape, which for me was quite, it was quite something, really. I was quite proud of that, and I remember ringing my parents to say I'd just been promoted, which was quite nice. I've done it twice. That first time from Ireland in 90, and then the final time from Afghanistan in 2007 to say I was coming off. I was becoming one off class 2. I'd come off the board, the promotions board, but it was the day that I got given that slide.
That's cool.
Which was quite nice, and it was it was a nice way of seeing the two things come together. So, and in between there's been operational. So I think the first tour, Ireland tour with 90, was learn a lot from the role I was in. Some soldiering skills. Obviously, I was then involved. I then went as a BCR like yourself to the first Gulf 1991, which is what 34 years this year. Yeah, it must be.
Yeah. I don't like to count because I just feel
it's
older.
about 34. I think about 34 this year as we went out there, and then ended up with 40 Regiment as one of the BCRs.
I was going to say we had we all went out there as BCRs, but some people got split off, sent down to Riyadh, and we ended up having very different experiences. You actually deployed with 40 Reg. I ended up guarding the embassy in Kuwait. You know, it is what it is. But I mean, for yourself, what was the experience of that like? You were in war. You know, it was. Not two ways about
for
whether
me.
people want to call it that or
was
not.
quite something. I mean, to see the might of the Royal Artillery and everything, and to see the guns firing, and I remember seeing the rockets, the MLRS rockets going. I remember one night being on the roof of a 432, and anybody who's worked with armoured vehicles will know how enjoyable sitting on the louvers is when you're cold and you need a bit of warmth, and obviously the air coming to the... Basically, it's got the air coming to the decks, isn't it, the engines. Sitting, and I remember one night in the dark, sitting on the louvers, watching the guns of 40 Regiment, and all the... there might have been, I think 26 may have been there as well, and the rockets going. Watching this, I'm going to say firepower demo, I suppose.
I was going to say,
yes, they were firing on targets, but I remember sitting there thinking, "Wow, I will never ever see this again." And I was, I knew I'd only been promoted the year before, young lads bombardier. I remember sitting there. I mean, I'd have been 20, 21. I turned 22 in the July of that year, and I remember sitting on the roof of that truck thinking, "Wow," watching these guns, just watching this. It was unbelievable, truly unbelievable. And we came back, and then subsequently went on to other roles in 14 Regiment, in the Bates Trials team. And then subsequently did, I think my next tour was Bosnia in 1998. I don't know how far you want to go to this point. I don't know.
Far as you want, really. I mean,
that's fine. And then subsequently I went to, when I look back now, I joined 19 Regiment in January 97. Then by that time I was a full screw. Went on an operational tour to Bosnia in 1998. Subsequently again in 2000. So I remember doing a 6-month tour in Glamok. And we handed over to 3RHA. And I think that's where our paths didn't cross, but they crossed because I used to run the database of the Glamok area, which I then subsequently you took over, if I remember rightly.
I think it was used like we put autocorrect in the computers, that every time we typed something, it said something else. And
that wasn't me.
Some of the sit reps got sent up with us not knowing that, and we got in the shit.
That wasn't me. So subsequent, and then suddenly, so that was 98. Back out in 2000, and then 2000, I obviously on halfway through the tour of Bosnia, I then came back on promotion to sergeant, joined 3-4 battery in March 2000, and that's something when we re-met again, wasn't it? So it was quite nice for you, realistic for me to say, And I remember seeing you on basically my first day walking around the gun park as a newly promoted sergeant, bumping into someone I hadn't seen since, realistically, since one evening in a Naffy bar in Gutterslow in 1986. It was quite nice.
Yeah.
I know we'd seen each other in between.
I mean, I really, I mean, I say it. I think back to 3-4 battery with fond memories. I mean, when people are getting told, right, you're going to Lark Hill, you were like, oh, fuck's sake. I don't want to go to Lark Hill because you'd only ever been on courses and stuff like that. And you were like, oh, there's too much rank around there. There's this, that, there's other, that had a bad reputation. I didn't want to leave 3-4 battery. I mean, I was put on the OPs, which was wrong. I wasn't OP trained or anything like that, but I ended up doing the FPC, which was cool because that's the sort of stuff I was used to. I'd been on the guns, subsequently went into the SIG store, and then went on to command posts. And I really, really enjoyed 3-4 Barry. And everyone I've spoke to who's done time at 3-4 Barry loved it. I think it helped that I was doing tug of war for 2 years while I was there as well. With the tug of war team, loved it. But I honestly, I think back to Lark Hill, them 2 years that I did there, quite fondly. I enjoyed being there. Going out every day, you were working, you were doing what you're supposed to do. You were firing the guns, you were working in the CP, you were being an OP. You were doing your trade. You were doing your trade. How did you feel about it?
I totally agree with you. I'd say I went there as a sergeant and seeing subsequently people who've been there as different ranks coming back throughout. You could see because, as you're saying, they're out there every other day. On the guns, on the CPs, CPX signals, doing everything, and you could see sometime, and then later on when I became a TSM troop commander, obviously subsequently when I was in the Royal Artillery, you could see people becoming more rounded individuals. You could see that the ability, the skills they brought, and the confidence. And I also love that word. That was an old 19 word, the sparkle. But you could see they got that little bit more about them because they, as you're saying, they're doing the job every day. They're on the ranges, they're doing this, they're doing that. And that's subsequently and then later on when we went obviously to do operations later, that's it's required to do. And it certainly was. When I look back now and I'd been into, sadly when Force Assembly disbanded, I'd spent a few years at the school, obviously at Lark Hill, working in trials and development, and then subsequent with getting to work with all that area. And you're saying, and I had worked with that aspects of there, and I'd done courses at the school, I'd done other things at the school. And I think one point when I look back now, I had, and the old school terms, 3 detachment commanders courses, subsequent other master, training courses, management courses, etc. And when I look back now and I think, of all the time, I really did enjoy, as you say, that part of being at 3-4 Battery. Well, 3-4 Battery, subsequently for me, was when I'd first, on my, again, obviously people were there, I went on, for a couple of years, ERE, wasn't it?
Yeah.
ERE posting. And I'd gone there from being the equivalent of being a full score on a Friday to being a sergeant on a Monday morning. And it basically was like that. I left Colchester on the Friday, went home for the weekend, and on the Monday morning, I felt like a new kid on a new school. It was a bit like you were saying earlier about what's it like going to for your regiment for your first time. I actually went to the School of Artillery on promotion as a sergeant on the first day.
Yeah, and I mean, people would look at that as well and go, spruggy sergeant just rocking up here. But it is what it is, isn't it?
But then subsequently, you then went back to the regiment with a little bit more, but to 19. And
I've seen that backfire. I've seen that backfire in people's careers as well. That obviously the regiment hasn't seen them for 2 years, and if you haven't got a good report written to you, or you haven't, been looked after while you've been on an ERE, it can backfire. I mean, one of the things I always noted about 3-4 Barry was, let's not beat about the bush. The regiment used it to get rid of people. The waifs and strays the people who did, fucking him again, right? Let's get rid of him. Send him to Larkhill for 2 years, and then just forget about him for 2 years. So there was lots of guys there who probably didn't fit in, you know what I mean? But they all really, it was weird. Everybody just worked together. So you had gun crews of people from different regiments. You had CPs with people from different regiments. And like I said, that's not, fucking call a spade a spade. Some of the guys were sent there because they were shit, or they were,
I
or
also
there were
found as
discipline
well.
problems, but they were all brilliant.
I also found as well that when I was at 3-4 Battery, it was a really nice way of networking, getting to know people. And I didn't really know that until afterwards, that subsequently I'd be there as the Six Sergeant at 3-4 Battery, which I was at the time. And then you'd have members of the Gunnery Careers Course, who then subsequently would then become to the regiment I was in later as obviously TSMs, BSMs, whatever, and they would remember you as that guy, or as that, well, you're the bloke who helped us doing that fine plan, aren't you? I remember you. And it was, and I didn't do it to covered favours. Yeah, that's probably a nice way of putting it. I didn't do it at the time when I was in 3-4. It was just the way I was, and the way I have been then, the way I was then, the way I was before, the way I was then, and the way I am now. But it was quite nice to go, oh, I remember you. You're that guy from then. And it was actually quite, when I look back now, it was quite a nice, I really did enjoy that period. And then subsequently, when I look then from that point, then we've turned back. That was in 2000. We head towards the 2003, and then I was promoted to Staff Sergeant in September of 2003. So, no, and then...
Fucking hell, I was still Lance,
yeah, Iraq 2005, Iraq 2007. Sorry, Afghan 2007. So that was at Iraq 2005, Afghan 2007. So when I look back now, it's quite, and then subsequently while I was there, I was doing all my management started looking, and I must admit, when I did my signals course in 2003, subsequently then later on 2004, my CIS manager's course, obviously, I started looking at what I was going to do when I was going to leave.
Which a lot of people
start
planning too late.
And I remember I wouldn't say I'd become the eternal student. So that's probably a bit too harsh. But other people would probably disagree with me on that one. But then subsequently, for every course I did in the military, if there was a civilian equivalent, civilian equivalent or a vocational equivalent, I would do the extra work. Did it when I was doing my CIS manager's course. I did it when I was doing my management courses. My first civilian qualification in management came from Bosnia in 2000. It came from Bosnia in 1998.
That's some forward.
That, in some ways, yes. To think that somebody always said to me that no matter what day you join the army, one day you're going to leave.
Yeah.
Whether it's a year, 20 odd years, one day you're going to leave. And I can't remember who said it to me to this day, but it sat with me in the background. Is that one day you're going to... And then I think, sadly, I don't think some people actually recognise that.
No, a lot of people don't. I didn't. I'm like a cat, I suppose. You just live day to day. You don't plan forward that much, And that's one of my. If I have got many regrets, it's probably one of them. I didn't look forward enough. You do get people who all of a sudden they're leaving the army and like, shit. Where's the last 20 odd years gone? What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And they suffer. It's a hard thing, really.
I remember that when I look back now, when I'm still talking about something where I got up to, is that I remember sitting in Afghanistan in 2007, I think by about that point, by the time I retired from the military, I'd got from joining the army October 1985 to 2011 when I finally left. I'd got over 30 qualifications. Different levels of qualification. They're not all high, but there was. And I always remember watching, I always used to say to people, there's three things you got to think about when you leave the army. One, you got to find a job. You got to get qualifications, and you got to find somewhere to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting one night in a tent in Afghanistan, writing an essay, watching people watching their DVDs, which is fine. I'm not too bothered about that. And I remember years later when I came to finally start going through that resettlement process of leaving, all I had to do was find a job. Of those three, because me and my good lady bought our house. I'd got my qualifications. All I had to do was find it, and there was people run. And I remember one of them. I'm not going to say who had been in that tent in that corner watching those DVDs, suddenly running around saying, "How do I do this course? How do I get this? How do I get that? I need this qualification." I said, "Well, I've got it." And when I look back now, I think, as I said to you before, why did you join that? It's probably the best things I've ever done. It's certainly set the way I am. There are other aspects along that journey. Yes, I've done not operational tours in Ireland of 90, Gulf 91, 2 Bosnia years, Iraq 2005, Afghan 2007. Obviously, subsequently got been promoted along the way. And I think when I look back now, it's certainly made the way I am.
Yeah.
However, there are other aspects subsequently with PTSD from events predominantly. There are incidents when I look back now of Ireland in 90, 91, aspects of Bosnia in 98. Predominantly, most of it is from 2005. But it's another aspect, sadly, of 2000. So each of those tours has got aspects that has affected me over the years and probably made me the way I am now. But I'm not sure where your next question is or where we're going.
So my next question would be, you mentioned a tour of Iraq in 2005 on Optelic. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, certainly. 2005, a lot of my friends on Facebook will be aware of this one, is that I was the PSYOPs team, Tactical Psychological Operations team commander in Basra in 2005, from April 2005 to 2011. We were tasked to, mainly in the area around Basra, around the dockyards, around the air, in the city itself, around by the airport, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dealing with civilian integration, etc., talking to the population, asking them questions, dealing with things. Probably one point was one of the only soldiers who carried 120 rounds in one pouch and 120 crayons in the other. So you could hand out to the kids and you could talk, and we had bags and things. There were a few incidents with obviously the rocket attacks on Chateau Arab Hotel. One in particular is a roadside bomb incident in Iraq, outside the Chateau Arab Hotel on the 21st of August 2005, which then has led to me and the incidents of that day being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. There are other aspects, but that predominantly, that one main incident is the main. There are others, but that is the one. There are a combination of others, but that is the main one that I find I do struggle with, and it affects me sometimes when I'm driving. Still, and that incident was 20 years this year.
Yeah.
When I look back at it now, and that was the 21st of August, 2005. The reason why I'm late on the date is that we did the tour from April 2005 through to end of October. I handed over to we run Telic 6. Telic 6 it was. Telic 6, we run a 2-vehicle crew. Obviously, I was in the front vehicle, and I deal with other aspects of that. And then something a lot of people I was involved with are, so will probably listen to this podcast. And I'm very proud of the way we, as a multiple, as a tactical psyops team, and I think of many of them here when I'm talking about them now, how reacted that day. And I will continue to always the friendships and be proud of the way we were and how we reacted. One of the guys who'd been in the rear vehicle, George Davey, had been transferred across from the Royal Anglians. He came across to us in about the June of 2005, and sadly was killed in Afghanistan in 2007, in May 2007, and he's buried just outside Beccles in Suffolk. And if I ever find myself across there, I will spend a few moments in that cemetery. It's a small little village cemetery. I will go and say hello. I think is probably the nicest way of doing it. And that is one. And in particular, there's 3 of them that I remember. Is that, and then subsequent. So 21st of August 2005, I then hand over. We come to the end of our 6-month tour. I'm in this Chattel Hotel. The next, obviously, the gentleman I had. The next incoming. We're finishing Telic 6, which is obviously the name of the operation over that 6-month period. And obviously Telic 7 comes in, which is from November 2005, which I think you were on.
Yeah.
To about the April of 6, which I think you were on. And then I handed over to a sergeant from the Fusilier, Sergeant Jones. Sergeant Jones, sadly, was killed on a roadside bomb incident just down the road from the Chattel Hotel by the dockyard in 3 weeks to the day that I'd handed over to him. 3 months to the day of that roadside bomb incident. And he's buried in Tidworth, and whenever I go anywhere near Tidworth, I don't go there specifically. If I ever do, I will do. But if I'm ever going to the A34 to Southampton with work, I'll always, because it's actually the short way going that way via Tidworth and Marlborough of the Downs and going back that way round. I will go and see him. And I think for me, it's always about that. It's that lovely phrase Marcus Aurelius said. It's not the young man who misses the days he never knew. It's those who are left who remember who share the pain of those lost days.
Fucking hell.
It is. I think I don't got it. It's quite right. But you think, and let me just think that about again. It's that it's not the young man who misses the days he never knew. It's those that are left who bear the pain of those lost days. And I quite regularly will pop into that cemetery in Tidworth. Just I will go and see it, and it's just down the lap from where he's buried. Where he is in Tidworth Cemetery, he's about 3 down for that lad from 3RHA. 3 or 4 down.
Yeah.
He's Sergeant Jones is on he's on the end, about 3 or 4 down. And I must admit, whenever I go, I make a point of visiting. It's It's quite. I can't not go past Tidworth Cemetery and popping in and say hello. And I've
Do you
been there
find
at
it?
6 o'clock in
Do
the
you find
morning,
it's
10 o'clock in the afternoon. Sorry, 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's kind of like, I'm going to pop in for 5 minutes.
do you find that therapeutic doing
Yes. And one day I actually did, we had like a Teams call with work. It was like a Teams meeting of our team. Yeah. And where were you? And I was like, I've come to say hello with a friend of mine. And I could tell they were like, this is real. I don't think I'll ever forget that day, that morning. As I said, we got back. We just got back, obviously in November 2000. I don't think I'll ever, the pain I felt that after that, subsequent, and then it triggered things. And a year, obviously, you do struggle with the fact, wasn't your time, wasn't your plan, and I have to accept that and cope with that. And I carried on subsequently, and then the following year, 19 Regiment was warned to go to Afghanistan in the summer, early 2007. And a year to the day that Sergeant Jones had been killed, we were based in Larkhill in Wiltshire, which is only about 10 miles away from Tidworth, isn't it? Yeah. And I remember thinking, it's a year to the day. I'm going to go and say hello. And Mark, bow my head for a few moments. I remember going back and going to see his grave, and then coming back, and there was about 15 missed calls on my phone, because Larkhill's not the best place for phone reception, so it doesn't work, so you might as well leave it, and it'll work like an answer phone. And it was my wife telling me she was pregnant on the same day, a year later. And in some ways, it's 2006. We then go to Afghanistan in 2007, early 2007. As you said before, I then, although I'd come off the board, the WO2 board in the early 2007, I actually was actually promoted. Promoted, I suppose. In about April 2007. Came back early in June. My young lad was born on the 30th of June 2007. And then subsequently, a friend of mine who was in 19 Regiment, Dave Wilkinson, was killed the following day. So it's quite hard. And I must admit, when I sadly was diagnosed with PTSD in 2014, one of the things they couldn't understand, or I couldn't cope with, is how they're all joined up together, but they're not. They're all separate, but they're all two things. And when I look at it now, that my lad is 17 now, he's passed his driving test. In June this year, he's 18. And the following day, Matthew's going to be 18 this year, he's going to be an adult. I can hear it already. And I've learned over the years now, I've got myself into trouble a couple of times over the years, but I have learned now, and you will probably, you're a friend of mine, a friend of mine who will have known Dave Wilkinson, you will see that, period of sadness around the 1st of July, is that I've learnt now to celebrate.
Yeah.
Celebrate Matthew's birthday to about 8 o'clock on that day. And for about 10 years now, he kind of looks at me as though he's going to ask me again now. And I will actually say, have you had a nice birthday? As soon as he says yes, I will then turn at the end of his birthday on the 30th. Then we go into the 1st of July. Subsequently, we go through to there. And then to remember Dave Wilkinson. But it's quite something. I came out of the military. I retired in 2011. And subsequently, I was diagnosed with PTSD in 2014. I did the 6-week course with combat stress. Give you the skills to understand what's going on. But it's a bit like on the job learning. I think it doesn't solve these things. And as I'm saying, they didn't teach me how to do that thing with Matthew, but I've learned how to do it. And you learn because people don't understand what you're going through. They don't understand. I am very anxious sometimes. I'm in a car and I'm watching what's going on, or I'm aware of what's going on around me. And it can be quite, for me, quite saddening. But you watch what's going on around you. And that's why I found sometimes how I can use what's happened to me to help others. When I came out when I came out the military, I'd always said to you, I said, Bill, one day I was planning to leave. Yeah. Whether it would be take your pension at 40. I was planning to leave at 40 in 2009, but with about 6 months to go. Some major, would you like to do a 2-year extension? We'd like to stay for another 2 years, put it mildly. And I remember thinking, I don't know. And I remember running back to what I said. So it was on Friday. It was on a Thursday evening. I said, can I give you the answer on Monday morning? I said, I need to go and speak to the boss. And he looked at me and said, Sam Major, I'm your boss. Then he dawned on me that he wasn't. In this one, he wasn't.
No.
So I went out and I remember saying to the good lady, and I was saying that, they want me to stay on for another 2 years. And she basically said, are you going to, I've got the house to myself for another 2 years. Yes. Are you going to come home on the weekend? Yes. Are you going to get paid again? Yes. Are you getting more pension? Yes. Why you asked? It was kind of so,
yeah.
So I carried on until 2011. But in that period, I'd always started to prepare to leave. I'd always enjoyed instructing. I think one of the first lessons I ever gave was in 1989. And when I look back now, and I think subsequently, over those years, I'd gained, for everything I'd done in the military, there was a civilian qualification, I'd gained one. And I always enjoyed teaching, whether it be as part of regiment instructors, with our signals, CPAC, or all the aspects I've been involved in, or helicopter handling instructor. It's that I'd enjoy teaching. And I think the one thing is they always say to you is find out what you want to do in life. But I'm always a firm believer is find out what you don't want to do in life or you can't do in life. And that will channel where you want to go. And I'd always gone into, I'd seen about education and I'd gone into, so by the time I came out of the military in 2011, I got about 30 qualifications. Subsequently, I've carried on. It's about 50 now, to include the military. I started, I think some of the things when I look back now over the years, I did 6 years of Open University while I was in the army with a history degree. The first year I did of Open University was 2005, and I actually remember the old plate body armours.
Yeah.
The single plate body armour with the flap.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Velcro flap.
Yeah, the Velcro flap with the
plate. With the plate at the front. I always remember to this day, we used to go on when I was obviously with the PSYOPs team, is I would print an essay off, put it down my front panel, not on the inside of the panel, but on the outside of the plate. The plate would we'd drop off for a coffee. I'd scribble on it, put it back in. So I did my first year of Open University in RAC 2005. I did my third year of Open University in Afghanistan. Remember I said to you about sitting in the tent typing essays?
Yeah.
I was typing essays about Henry VIII in a tent in Afghanistan and doing other stuff at the time. That was quite entertaining doing that. And then subsequently I went on to do other things, getting obviously my qualifications to leave. I then went into education.
How did you find the transition? I mean, a lot of people, like we touched on earlier, a lot of people kind of suffer from it, and maybe they weren't prepared or they're just not in the right mindset. I thought I was fine until about 5-6 years later, and it wasn't until I had counselling last year that it was, for me, again, I mean, a lot, if people have listened to my podcast, they'll know about this. Part of my anxiety disorder, if you want to call it that, was that I didn't accept the end of my army career. I thought I had, but it wasn't. It didn't manifest itself till probably 5 years, 6 years later, where I started to become a bit of a recluse type of thing and cut myself off from everything. Cut myself off from my fucking family that lived with me almost.
I think, for me, go back to what I said to you before, I'd always been preparing to leave.
Yeah.
There was always that, it will be the 4th of July 2009, that subsequently became the 4th of July 2011. And that's why I think those dates have always been in great. And I always thought, well, you've got to prepare to leave. As I said to you before, you need 3 things: somewhere to live, a job, the qualifications to get it. And I always worked on those. And then subsequently, I went on to do other things. I always remember that once I left the army, I saw a job working in further education at a college in Worcestershire. And in Worcester College, what was then Worcester College of Technology. And I always remember, and I'll never forget the late Zelma and a lovely lady called Irene Bentley, is that they'd interviewed me and gave me a job in education, and I was just basically coming out the military with a rack of CVs, an end of service testimonial, a couple of certificates that probably the ink wasn't dry on, especially in assessing, and I'll never ever forget that opportunity they gave me. And I'm very proud. I'm very proud of that, and I don't think I'll ever forget that opportunity. And Zen was sadly no longer with us. But obviously, again, with obviously Zen and Irene, about being an opportunity to go into education, work with apprentices, work and see, and you've seen with obviously going through LinkedIn what I'm doing. Well, I'm working with apprentices now. I've worked in further education now, 13 and a half years, working with management apprentices from various levels, various levels and support, etc. And within that time, I've got further qualifications, got my teaching qualification, qualified with teacher status. I completed a master's degree in history in World War I studies.
I must admit, when I seen that on LinkedIn that you had a master's degree in history, I was fucking blown away. I was like, what?
Yeah, and that to me is a bit of a hobby thing. It's I've got an Open University. I graduated from the Open University on, if I remember right, something like the 29th of June 2011. It was a Saturday. I retired from the army the following Saturday. And I remember with all the... so I did that. So that was with the Open University. It's... When I look back now and think what I've done and what I've achieved, from that military. And I've said to you before, is that I know my father said to me, he was talking to me, I've got a lad who's in year 10 now. He's 15. He said, you want to join the military? And I know, be very careful where I go here. And I know why he said it. Because he's seen, you remember the 17-year-old 17-year-old me.
Yeah.
There might be a little bit of difference. Right, but definitely on waistline, waist size. But you've probably seen that difference because not only you're not only seeing the end result, you're seeing the start point.
Yeah. No, I get that. I really do.
You said I'm one of the only ones you can say I knew him then and I see him now.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice, really. And I said subsequently when you said to me, "Are you free?" And I said yes. It was like, wow, why now? And when I said to you before, when I knew you were there in 2000, as Bonnie Burrows was taking us around the gun park, you were one of the first people, and he kind of looked at us to say, "What's going on here?
What are you doing here?
You're a senior NCO. What are you doing?" And
rub it in. Cheers.
Yeah, but it's and I think overall now, master's degree, and all those aspects of that, and it's there being helped to help others. I think, and one thing I found with PTSD over the years, how do you cope with it and everything, is that, yes, it's helping others to succeed. It's about bearing that loss.
Yeah, I get that.
I have to accept the fact is that my 21st of August 2005, I survived an incident. 3 months of the day, somebody else sadly didn't. I have to live with that. I have.
Yeah.
I do. I continue. And I will. And if I can bear that loss and continue to help, and that's Sergeant Jones, and I've got to know his mother very well. She's one of the nicest ladies I've never actually met.
Right. Yeah.
But she's something very special to me, and I will do my best for my learners where I can to support them. I have to accept the fact is that day happened for me and everyone in that vehicle, and then subsequently 3 months, and it was exactly 3 months to the day. You got two people who grew up 3 miles apart, just outside Birmingham, 2 Sundays. It's very coincidental in the right or the wrong. I don't know. It's it's very, and that's why, when I think I've said to you is that I've always, why did I join the army? It goes back to my grandfather. I've always been interested in history.
I was going to lead on to that because you've got your master's degree in history. Obviously, you love it. Otherwise, you wouldn't study so hard for that. And I know the other aspect of what you call your hobby or your part-time job or whatever you want to call it, the battlefield tours. So I was going to ask you about that. How did you get into that, and what do they consist of?
I always find it interesting. Is that again? It's that to join the army, you always find a background and things, and whether it be finding out about my grandfather or going on battlefield tours. And I remember as a young lad in juniors, so the junior leader in Royal Artillery, I forget the people, I know what we refer to juniors, is that we've been on a sailing trip to France, to Normandy.
Hmm.
And I remember being at Pegasus Bridge in 1986 as a very young soldier, meeting the late John Howard on Pegasus Bridge. Now, John Howard was Major John Howard, who led
Yeah.
the landing at Pegasus Bridge. And I always remember how he talked about it. Now, I'm sure over the years now I've been on battlefields myself. I'm sure the story may have, but I
Embellished. No,
embellished.
it's not. It's,
I'm glad you said that, not me.
yeah, embellished is the wrong word, really. It really is, because that implies blowing it up.
I know what you're
It's
saying.
not. Yeah.
And I'd always enjoyed it. And I got myself into history through being in the batteries, through all artillery within the batteries. You get to know the histories. You get to know aspects of this. And I'd always been involved. And then I got the opportunity to become a battlefield tour guide. And I work for Ledger, the battlefield tour company, the coach company, but it's obviously got a battlefield tour side of it. Last year I was involved in the 80th anniversary for D-Day, the commemorations, tours to there, taking groups out there. I was there for Arnhem, taking other trips across. And also this year coming up, I've got for the 85th anniversary of Dunkirk, 85th anniversary of Le Havre. I've got trips to Arnhem. And I find, for me, as being able to tell those stories, for me, from an academic background, I work with education, teaching. I've done previously lecturing in business with business studies in colleges, and obviously teaching in the background. I love that opportunity to it's a nice way for me to talk about stories in fields without the academic side of it, I suppose. You can come outside the lectern, you can come out into that, talk about, bringing those things to
You can put personality into it as
you
well.
can put, you can bring out something like, this is a relic, this is a letter, this is something that you can talk to people about. And I've sat there and I actually read a letter once for what are we doing, supporting the Army Benevolent Fund for their charity walk, of a letter that was sent to my great uncle's wife about him being killed. And as they went across the field, I said it was in that field over there, and I read the letter. And we walked across the field where they were, and it
I
was
imagine that can be quite
100
emotional
years,
at times.
less a week of his death, and it's quite something. And I remember earlier last year I was on the Arnhem 80th anniversary, and I went down the coach talking to people, saying, "Why are you coming on this tour, Frankie?" Well, because I've seen the film A Bridge Too Far. "Why are you coming on this tour?" "My dad was killed at Arnhem." So I had a lady whose father, Lance Sergeant McGregor, who'd been killed with a recce squadron on the 17th of July, 1944. So 17th of September 1944. And then on the other side, I had Bombardier Bradbury, who'd been killed on the 19th of September 1944 at the bridge. And that was quite something. So you got these two, and I mean this in a lovely way. These two young ladies whose dads, one had been killed on the 17th of September on one side of the coach, and the other one who'd been killed on the 19th of September 1944. And it was very special for me is to take them to there. I know they'd been to, one of the ladies, the first time she'd been to that cemetery was 1947.
Wow.
And to take her back there again, and she was 87. It was quite something. Obviously, those two, to see them and to go back there, and you can walk the fields with these. Not obviously to those, and I, to say this is what happened there over there, this is what happened, and with all the things that goes on, with PTSD and other aspects of it, I find, for me, battlefields is one of the most rewarding things.
I'm surprised that it doesn't, you're learning about what happened during the Second World War and the First World War, and you're reliving them stories. And you find that a bit of catharsis for your own PTSD with it. I'm surprised it doesn't go the other way. I'm surprised.
People will say, I always see you at your best, Vern, or you're always smiling. I don't say I go around with a sour face all day at work, but you're always at your best on battlefields. Because I think some ways, for me, it's a bit like counselling amongst veterans.
Yeah. Get it. Understanding it.
I think sometimes, and you have to. For me, I don't know if you've ever been to the battlefields of World War One or World War Two. Perhaps that's for another conversation outside this forum. Is that for me? It's very special, and and it's Vern, can you take this regiment back to thing? Let's go and do this. Let's go and find these cemeteries. Let's go and do this. Let's go and see this. Let's go. Let's make this special. Let's go and make this unique. I've taken regiments to there. I've actually seemed to see relatives to see their own, people see relatives' graves or specific take crosses and things like that. And sometimes I'll just, when I go, every year I will support the poppy appeal. And I'll make a substantial donation, but I'll get myself a box of crosses. The wooden crosses.
Yeah.
And I always obviously make a substantial donation to cover it. But I take that box of crosses with me on my tours. And basically the box of crosses I buy at November of one year cover me through the period to November the following year. So when I'm on battlefield tours, I'll say, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a few crosses with me. If you feel you want to lay a cross, or you feel that urge to, or you want to do it, here's one. The wooden crosses with the things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find that for me, I find it very therapeutic. I find it very,
you've got a connection as well. Not only in the back of your mind, you're thinking about your grandfather, but because you were a soldier, you've got that. It just reminded me of something that happened years and years and years ago. We were on the ranges in Saltown, so when still those closed now. And it was a weekend, and we had a battery smoker. And you know what a battery smoker's like. We all light a big fire and get very drunk. And I found myself wandering off. I was pissed as a fart. We walked off into the woods, and I came across the weirdest thing to me as a young gunner was a graveyard in the middle of Salthouse Ranges. It wasn't massive, but it was there, and it was fenced off, and I found myself quite emotional. And one of the full screws was like, "Where's Frankie gone?" And he'd seen me off into the distance, so fuck's sake. So he come waddling after us and called us, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Fuck's this? It's a graveyard." I had tears in my eyes. I just felt emotional. It might have been the beer, it might have been whatever, And he looked at me and says, Do you not know what happened here? And I said, "Well, no." He goes, "Well, that's a Russian prisoner of war burial ground, graveyard. As the Brits were coming up, they had the Russian prisoner of war camp over at Belsen, and there was other ones slotted about the area, smaller ones, and the Germans decided to dispatch them before we could get there and everything." And that's where there was one of the burial sites of them. And I was like, I was quite upset. And I was like, I don't understand why I'm getting upset. And he explained it to me. He goes, because you've got a connection. Because you understand you might only be a young lad, but you're a soldier. And that's what they were. And you can feel that. You know what I mean?
I think these are quite nicely. I was thinking about this when you were talking. Is that I've been a battlefield tour guide now off and on for about 2004. 2018, I found myself with Ledger Battlefield Tours supporting the Royal British Legion's GP90, which was their Grand Pilgrimage 90 years later. 1928, the British Legion as it was, and on a battlefield tour. They went to France, they went to Belgium, and they ended up at the Menin Gate and Ypres in Belgium. And in GP90 in August of 2018, there was all the branches. Are they branches? Sorry, RBL branches. Yeah, they are branches, aren't they? Came together to do a mass ceremony, parade through Ypres to the Menin Gate with all the standards and all the things. And I can provide some pictures of this for you if you want. And basically, it was, I think it was about 60 coaches. 30 coaches would do the Ypres Day, which is in Belgium. The other 30 would do the Somme Day. So that was day one, and then Group A, Group B. On day two, it was a swap. So if you'd been on Somme on day one, you'd be on Ypres day two, and vice versa. And I was on that group where I was on the Somme on the first day and Ypres on the second day. Now, on the second day, it was the local businesses would provide sandwiches, etc. And I think I was on coach, 316, I think, if I remember rightly. And you'd come through, you go to the cemetery, and opposite one of these cemeteries is a cafe, Who's Crater, on the Menin Road in Ypres. And you'd go to the cafe and say, right, coach 316, can I have 32 ham and cheese, 15 tuna, 5 cheese, etc. And then obviously so basically it was a case of a bit like a rolling replen as we do. You go through, collect everything that you need, and off you go. And I always, as a battlefield tour guide, you're always looking for something to talk about. Whether it's shrapnel balls, it's letters, it's medals, it's something that you can engage with. And I've always been interested in a strange way of the plight of the missing of World War One, those who have no known grave. I think off the top of my head, of the million casualties of Britain and the Empire, about 500,000 of those are missing.
Wow.
And, commemorated and memorials to the myth. This is across everywhere. And I'd always, and what you can't do, you come with a seminar, and I'll send you a record, I'll send you a letter of it. Yeah, I'll send you something about this. It's the case. And this happened, obviously, something. And I've always been interested in the plight of the missing. And they commemorated the Menin Gate, the unknown warrior in Westminster Abbey, etc. And I wanted something to talk about. And this is in 2018, August 2018. And I thought, well, I'm going through the what we call the rolling replay at Who's Crater Cafe. And opposite Who's Crater Cafe on the Menin Road is a cemetery, Who's Crater Cemetery. It's got over 6,000 graves in it. 2/3 of those are unknown. Okay? And you can't, if you look at the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, you can't look at the unknowns on the cemeteries. An unknown soldier of the Great War, an unknown soldier of the Royal Field Artillery, an unknown soldier of the, I'm trying to think where I am now, Northumberland Fusiliers. You can't look at those. You've got to look at the named graves. And I thought I need something to talk about. And my lad was 2007. He's 15 now. Where are we now? 2025, aren't we? It's been about, we're talking about 2018. So what we're talking about is about 8 now. 7 then, 8.
Yeah.
Right, it's 15 now. 2018. And then I said to him, I remember looking at the register, and if you go into Who's Crater Cemetery, you will only be able to see the known graves of this cemetery. And bear in mind, it's basically, if you were to look look to your right is the cafe. If you look to your right now, you'll see the cafe. If you look to your left, you would see the cemetery. It's either side of the road. It's probably the easiest way of describing this. And I thought, well, if I have something to talk about while I'm collecting these sandwiches, and I wanted to show them a grave return, where basically they clear the battlefields in 1918, 1919, 1920, 2021, cleared all the battlefields of these graves, and field graves and etc. So I got my little lad at the time, Ben, and I said to Ben, pick me a name. So Ben had displayed the list for Who's Crater Cemetery, displayed the list of the known graves in that cemetery. Now, my first name is Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My middle name is Austin, Austenen. I-N. Austenen.
Oh.
And Ben, who was what? 5, 6, 8, 9. I'd have to think about this. Picked Private Austin off the register. Austen. This is 2018. And I said, are you sure with that name? And he said, yes. I said, why? He said, I like that name, he said. And I then looked at the name, Austin's record, from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Next to it was an unknown Royal Fusilier. This is in August 2018. Austin was killed in August 1917. So we're already talking 101 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next to it, Austin's grave, was an unknown Royal Fusilier with a Distinguished Conduct Medal ribbon on the remains. Distinguished Conduct Medal in 1917 was one below a Victoria Cross. That then subsequently, I did further research, and I then submitted a case in the September of 2018 to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission to confirm that grave that was next to Austin was Sergeant J.H. Bott, Distinguished Conduct Medal of the Royal Fusiliers, commemorated on the Mending Gate. That was September 2018. January, in fact, this time last year, Commonwealth War Graves Commission, after all those years, wrote to me and said, Dear Vern, we accept the fact that case 462 is Sergeant J.H. Bott, and that grave, that unknown Royal Fusilier in Who's Crater, is his name. And on the 3rd of March this year, which was under last year, we are rededicating his grave. I think the actual ceremony was the 20th of March last year. I think the big thing about it was, when you look at the records is that he'd been marked in that grave on the 26th of March, 1919. So they'd gone out into the fields around. He'd been killed in August 1917. He'd been in that, been sadly out there for 2 years. And you think, but you can see the remains of when it says on the remains, he'd been out there for 2 years. And the ceremony was on the 20th of March last year. As you can understand, it caused a bit of a social media interest. He had a new grave 104 over 100, just short of 105 years later.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's something. That was on the 20th of March. The grave registers was the 26th of March 1919 to say he was in that grave. So somebody had gone and said, Austin, in that grave, unknown Royal Fusilier, Distinguished Gondel Medal. 26th of March last year, 105 years to the day, I was contacted by one of the relatives.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
You know, how did that make you feel?
Very special. I find it very. I look back and it's quite something to get a case, a grave re-identification case confirmed and agreed with. I look back now and I'm very proud of it. Really, truly am proud of it. And I sit there and smile and think, wow. I wasn't the only researcher who put something towards it as well. But when I look back and think, just short of 105 years, he was buried as an unknown. And then subsequently, and he's, since March last year, he's had a known headstone.
I mean, that's not going to give closure to his family because his remaining family wouldn't have known him, or wouldn't.
Yeah.
But they'll know the stories.
Yeah.
So it kind of, is it closure or just a full circle thing? It's not.
I don't know. I don't know because I think for me, it's.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to detract from. No, not the slightest. It's amazing.
But for me, it was when I look back of all the battlefield guiding I've done and all the bits and bobs, and then suddenly to be able to get this grave changed, it became, as soon as I came across it and did a bit of, I would say, academic investigation, and then suddenly you thought, well, it's got to be him because the other one's here, and the record says, and the unit diary said he was over there. It made it very special. And I always remember because on the Saturday before I received the email, my mum had sadly been rushed into hospital. On the Monday, I got the notification in the January of last year that they'd agreed the identification case. Yeah, yes, and that the rededication ceremony had been planned. That was on the Monday. On the Thursday, my mum came out of hospital. She's all right now. My father had been on the internet and had done a bit of research. And he'd done a bit of research and found out where this soldier had grown up in Staffordshire. And I remember thinking, I know so. And when you're involved in history, like I am with World War One, you get to know people you're like the go-to on, I'm going to say 3 battery.
Yeah.
Or 3RH. You'll know what I mean by that. You're the man to go to talk
You're
about.
the subject matter expert.
You're the
on
subject
that
matter expert.
area.
And I remember thinking, I'll speak to Jeff May. And I said, Jeff, I've had this case confirmed. And he said, I think I've got a photograph of him. So not only did we go from on a Monday morning saying Sergeant J.H. Bott now is a known in a grave in Hughes Crater Cemetery in Ypres and will be on the 20th of March with a ceremony, he then suddenly said, I've now got this picture of him. And this man suddenly came to life.
Yeah.
And here you have 21-year-old sergeant with the Distinguished Conduct Medal. And when you look at the picture, you've got a woodbine hanging out of his mouth. It's one of the most wonderful pictures. And I remember that being at the service in March last year, and I was actually part of the order of service. I had to do a reading. And you'd look round, and because the soldiers of now do those realities of war tours, there were 3 coachloads of soldiers, young soldiers, as we were in juniors, on reality of war tours, listening to me explaining about how my young lad called Ben had picked this grave, which then led to subsequently to this, and then subsequently to that man being as a named grave. And what I will do is subsequently, I'll send you some pictures of subsequently from this. I'll send you pictures of Sergeant J.H. Bott, and obviously my case for consideration. I think there's a case 462, and then I've done that talk I did it for SAFA, the SAFA charity last year. About the missing of World War One, the unknown warrior, how he was chosen of World War One. Obviously, he was in Westminster Abbey, and obviously the case of 462. I also has been aware, also support because I wasn't very well. No, that's the wrong word. I think you know probably. I think you know what I'm trying to say. I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Is that from 2018 and 2019, I've supported the Army Benevolent Fund. They've been doing their frontline walks, which is 60-mile charity walks over 3 days. I supported as their support historians. So when the people are walking across the World War One battlefields, you're talking about specific stands, what happened here as they're walking along the lines. And I've also 2023 I did the Army Benevolent the Army Frontline Walk, 60 miles over 3 days. First day was over the battlefield of the Somme, World War One battlefield of the Somme. Second day was over the Battle of Arras, and the third day was over the Battle of Ypres, finishing at the Menin Gate, which quite uniquely me being the way I am, but I suppose the Royal Artillery and other things created me, did the final day as a World War One gunner in the complete uniform. That was quite an emotive experience and a very warming experience.
I can imagine.
They also did it.
I've seen your Facebook post. I
did a
dressed
mile,
like that.
over a mile of it with one of the gas hoods on, with the tubes, with the hood, with the glasses, with the tubes, and obviously I must admit I did have to very kindly recruit people to assist me as I was going, because you've got no vision at all whatsoever.
No peripheral view, yeah.
You got no vision at all. And also, when I was they were obviously just following me along. But as you can imagine, I'm walking down the main road in Ypres, one of the main thoroughfares going into Ypres, and you've got people with a gas hood on. You can understand that. So I did that, and I said that was in That was in 2023, and I'm down to do the walk again, the frontline walk again this year in October. Yeah, October this year. So yeah, it's good. I'm quite looking forward to it.
Right, well, that, I think that's led us up to the story of the present day, and it's been an hour and 44 minutes, so I think I've used up enough of your evening. It's flown by, I must admit, it's flown by. It's been a fantastic catch-up. Again, I've got to say thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to appear on this podcast and talk about your time in the military and what you've done for the battlefield tours and what you've done since you've left the army.
I think what I would say though, matey, it's been 39 years. Let's not wait that long again.
No. I mean, we discussed before on a previous phone call. When you're up this way again, I've got a spare room. You know, and that goes for anyone. If anyone's in the area, ring me first, though. I'm not having anyone just say no.
It does make me think, though. The more I think about what we talked about, is that, as I said to you before, is that you saw me as a young lad.
Yeah.
In November 1986. You now see me today, and you can see that complete vice versa. You might think, oh, you haven't changed, or you've changed loads. I don't know. I don't think you have.
I don't think there's much change in me. No, I have. I kind of have. We all do. We all grow up a little bit. In our own little ways. I was still a child at heart. I'm still a bunny. I'm still a gunner. I'm still a soldier in my heart type of thing. But, it is what it is, isn't it? Right, Vern, I'll stop the recording now. Just give us a second. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that would be great, because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully we'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.